So, moving on to our next keynote presentation of the day is why clean energy for Indigenous communities. And we are pleased to have Chief Terry Richardson, Chief of the Pabineau First Nation, back to the main stage. Chief Richardson has been the chief in Pabineau First Nation since April of 2020. Before becoming chief, he was a counselor in the community for 8 years, worked as the Mi'kmaq benefits manager for the Trevally mining, and before that served 25 years in the Canadian Forces. Well, Alwyn for joining us, and I'll pass it over to you, Chief Richardson.
Thanks, Stanley. Appreciate it. And a big thank you to Terry with an I. Now you're going to hear from Terry with a Y. So you're getting the Terry team today. But that was really informative with ICE. Hello, bonjour, it's great to be able to present here today and talk a little bit about why green energy for First Nations communities and how we can benefit from it. I'm going to go in a little bit of a presentation that we gave to the standing committee to the province of New Brunswick. So I'll take a little bit from that. Unfortunately, I didn't have a chance, so you'll have to bear with me. But and Indigenous peoples and leaders in our communities, we always have to consider the impact that any decisions we make on the next will have on the next 7 generations into the future. So it's really important, that we look at that when we are making economic decisions. And despite the urgency to create wealth in our First Nation communities, it's really important. And I know in Pabineau, what we do is we have what we call the 4 pillars that we follow. And those are social, cultural, economic, but most important, environmental. So those are the things that we look at when we're making decisions in regards to green energy. And why green energy? Because we all know that climate change is real. Science doesn't lie. We know what's happening in the world right now. And it's important that we address those issues. And clean energy, reducing our carbon footprint, is vital to that. And I believe we're at the cusp right now to taking advantage of a lot more of just the other renewables, the renewables that were always there, wind, solar, hydro. But now we can look at the next generation, which is hydrogen, carbon capture. And as well as small modular nuclear reactors, which is one that can be talked about. I touched on it a little bit here. The rising sea levels are impacting First Nations. Our traditional foods and medicines are becoming more and more scarce. Water temperatures, levels. I mean, we have here in Atlantic Canada, we have great white sharks coming off of our coast. And why is that? Because of the climate change. Our waters are warming. We have more seals. Seals come up here, great white sharks eat the seals. Seals are eating our salmon and our other fishes. So, it's a never-ending cycle. So how do we get that balance back into place? We have to address the climate issue. As First Nations, we have to take the lead. If we don't, the world is going to, we're in a world of hurt. What are we leaving to our grandchildren? We're not leaving very much if we don't start addressing some of this. So that's why it's really important. I think the work that ICE does, the work that they do on the national level in regards to climate change, those are all major issues that are being addressed and it's great that First Nations are taking the lead. So why green energy for First Nations? Because it makes sense. When you look at New Brunswick and opportunities, right now in New Brunswick, we all know that there was a LORES program that came out with MB Power, and there was an opportunity to develop wind projects within the province of New Brunswick. Well, it's ironic that it went out to municipalities and it went out to First Nations. The only 2 successful wind farms that are being operated as that were under that program were both First Nation. And one was Tobic First Nation. And I'm happy to say that when Jibigdrig here in Pabineau, we have a 4 megawatt as well distribution power grid. Now, what that does, it provides a revenue to the First Nation eventually, a really good revenue as the project gets paid off. What would be really nice, and I was really happy to hear Terry Lynn speak on this with ICE, is we need First Nation developers. We need a First Nation renewable energy developer, because that's where then we're benefiting right from the beginning. We're getting the whole max amount of benefit. As it is now, we have to share that because we just don't have that expertise yet. But as we get there, I believe that's an opportunity that we can take advantage of. And we're poised to do that. Now, what we have to look at things too, and one of the bad things we do in First Nations is we're very myopic, because we look at things from a perspective of a First Nation perspective, which is important because we are the first people here. But we've also got to include that our partners, and our partners would be the municipalities and the region, because the reality is, if the region prospers, as First Nations, we prosper, because those are the people that are going to come to our retailers and buy the gas and buy the tobacco and buy whatever else we're selling in our retail stores and outlets. So it's really important that, you know, we don't keep that myopic outlook and start looking at a regional perspective. And what we've done, and it is a little bit different here, we are looking at things from a regional perspective in the Bathurst region. We've gone from Beldoon right up to Grand Anse, and we've said, okay, we're all partners here, all the municipalities. Let's get on board. Let's do something that's going to be beneficial to First Nations, but even more important, beneficial to the region, because if the region prospers, we prosper. So that's sort of the approach we've taken here in Pabineau First Nation, which is a little unique. You know, talking about the changes again, you know, in carbon, in regards to the reduction of carbon, you know, the emission of carbon producing fossil fuels. I mean, we here in northern region have probably one of the biggest emitters in the Beldoon power generating station, which is still burning coal. Now, that's what sort of led to us saying, okay, we can't continue to operate this way, as well as a lot of the industry in the northern part of the province was closing. We have, you know, the smelter here in Beldoon, which closed. We have a lot of pulp and paper mills that closed. So industry was closing down. So what can we get involved in that can bring back some prosperity to the region, but at the same time maintain our 4 pillars that we wanted? And that's where green energy made sense. You know, it's an opportunity right now when we look at what's happening in the world. You know, you look at Germany. Germany went to renewables. They went to windmills. The problem they encountered is there's no battery storage of power yet. So they had all these windmills, but when the wind wasn't blowing, they had no base power. So now what did they have to do? They went to Russia. They got onto natural gas. Now their dependency on natural gas. Now we look at what's happened in the Ukraine, and it's put pressure on Germany, because Germany needs power to survive. So now there's a big push on how can we get rid of, because natural gas is a carbon emitter. You know, whether you like it or not, it's not classified as a clean fuel. So how do we address this issue? And that's where I believe, and that's why we've supported, and we'll talk more tomorrow on the panel with the Port of Beldoon, is that development that's in a clean energy hub, where we could be in New Brunswick, the leader of clean energy, and not only in New Brunswick, but in Canada. I mean, the Port of Beldoon, you need export. The port is there. It's a deep water seaport that can export. And that's why I believe hydrogen, as well as carbon, you know, carbon capture is another one. You know, you can, under the carbon capture process, and it's happening out in BC right now, the first plant, and we're hoping that eventually there'll be a plant here in northern New Brunswick and Beldoon as well. This carbon capture aspect is a cleaner fuel. When we look at opening up, and this is scary, right? We're looking at opening up a seaport or seaway up through the north to go across. Well, if we start transporting ships out there with diesel and there's an accident, that could be a major catastrophe up north. So how do you reduce that risk? Carbon capture is a cleaner fuel that could actually, you know, fill that gap. And a lot of industries and a lot of vessels are being converted presently as we speak to actually burn the carbon capture fuel. So, you know, these are things that are happening. Hydrogen as well, we know is going to be, I believe, the new future fuel of Europe. Germany is on the cusp of deciding, like, you know, we need a cleaner fuel. How can we get it? Hydrogen is going to fill that void. And as well as, you know, the renewables are there, because the renewables would be needed to create the power to generate hydrogen. Therefore, you're using clean energy to create clean energy. It's a no-brainer. And, you know, that's why it's so great. The dynamics, the synergy that's created is right there. And that's what makes it so exciting with green energy. The opportunities we're going to get. First Nations are there. It fits us so often. And it's discouraging. And I say this in a not in a condescending way, but we're at the back of the bus. You know, everything happens, and then we go, "Oh, we missed it. What? There was an opportunity, and we could have done that." Here we have the opportunity to be at the front of the bus. Terry Lynn talked about grids. I love that. You know, one of the things that we have, problems we have within New Brunswick to create energy is we all know that NB Power is a crown corporation. And there's, you know, the Electricity Act puts limitations on being able to produce and sell power. That's the negative side. The positive side is our rates are probably one of the lowest across Canada, one of the 3 or 4 provinces with the lowest power rates across Canada, next to Quebec, obviously with all the hydro. So, you know, these are the negative sides. But if we could do it and actually create some changes to the Electricity Act and enable us to, do a grid process where we can actually produce power to power, we use transmission lines that belong to NB Power, so we pay them a transmission rate. But at the end of the day, the power is creating green energy anyway. So, you know, it's we're selling directly to the proponent. I believe there's an opportunity there, and these are things that we're investigating. Obviously, we're doing there's a lot of work being done there, and you know, I don't want to take too much of what we're going to talk about tomorrow. You know, obviously we have great partners in the region. The Port of Baldoon is one. I mean, they've done phenomenal work with us in the First Nation perspective of working with First Nations and saying, here's opportunity. And, you know, one of the problems we run into also that I want to stress is that business is action oriented, not process driven like government. And we have a tendency as First Nations, they caught up in that process driven system. When it comes to business, when they're knocking at our door, we have to be there to answer. Because when we answer, the opportunity's there and we're going to get it. And I believe we're at the cusp of being the leaders in this. And I'm not saying, okay, yeah, jobs are good. Oh yeah, contracting, that's good. Let's get some equity. Let's be real owners. That's where the money is. The equity is in the development. When you look at, you know, money that's being given out, I mean, we've come up with suggestions to government. You know, they've you know, I don't want to get into the big discussion about small modular nuclear reactors. We can do that another day. But, you know, as an example, government money has been given for that development. Why isn't there a percentage of that government money with a caveat to say 5% of that money that's given is for First Nation equity of the First Nation provinces in First Nation communities in New Brunswick? Why aren't we saying that to government? You know, hey, it's great you're giving all that money. That's First Nation. You know, we can argue about who the money belongs to. I mean, we've never got benefited from resource development. Here's an opportunity for us to become equity owners in this technology. So these are things that we're trying to pursue and push from our First Nation perspective and for all First Nation perspectives. You know, we talked about the CO2 and what's happening in the world right now. We know that deforestation is a big issue. Our forests are disappearing. And that's why we're having, you know, I mean, it could be one of the reasons. Science doesn't, I mean, you're going to have science from both sides that are going to argue. But I mean, you know, it was all in balance before, and now it's out of balance. Well, you know, it's because we can only take so much from the planet, and you know, the planet's going to fight back. And I believe that, you know, deforestation is a huge thing with our rivers, causing erosion in our rivers, high, you know, warmer water temperatures in our rivers. So this is right across Canada. We're not unique in New Brunswick to experiencing this. You know, every First Nation community, all 633 across Canada, are experiencing these issues, and we have to address them. And I believe First Nations should take the lead. You know, when we look at the way ahead, we focus what we can do as individuals and as a community. You know, we need government to come up with a better policy on logging, reforestation. We need a strategic plan on clean energy. I think First Nations, we should be at that table talking about the strategic plan on clean energy. Okay, what are your thoughts, First Nation? Does this fit into your realm of what you determine is clean energy? I believe we should be sitting at that table. You know, we have the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People now. That's a tool we've got to utilize as First Nations people. We have proponents that are willing to work with us, but you have to be cognitive of your proponents. There's a lot of snake oil salesmen out there. So you have to make sure you have a reputable proponent. We were fortunate in our wind development. We have the same one that actually our Willistic Way brothers and sisters have as a proponent. Very honest, open, easy to work with, nothing to hide. Talked about the numbers right from the beginning. Here's what's it's going to cost. Here's what the return is going to be as we move down the road. Those are all positive things, but you have to have the right proponents. The great thing about all this new technology that's coming ahead is that we have proponents with huge amounts of money. We're not talking hundreds of millions. We're talking $100 billion. And these proponents know that hydrogen, carbon capture, that's the future. Biomass to a level, but I mean, biomass is a problem too, because you get into that science of you have to leave some biomass in the forest for reforestation. So, you know, these are things that are there. In New Brunswick, right now, in northern New Brunswick, we are so excited because we see that we're right there at the cusp. The federal government knows as well. Our issue, I believe, is with the provincial government. We have to get them as excited as we are, because if they're not supportive, then they become a cog in the wheel that's really hard to turn. And you know what? They have to be there to understand that First Nations have to be a player at this table, that we are the first people. We need that right to be there, and we have a right to contribute. I don't want to be a hindrance to a development. No developer wants to come into uncertainty. No developer wants to come into a region and say, oh, I'm going to invest $30 million initially to see if this project is viable, and I'm going to have First Nations fight me on it. I don't want to do that. Sit us at the table at the beginning and let's say, okay, here's what our expectations are. How can we reach it? And now let's move forward. And the more First Nations involved, the better. You know, it's that old adage, you know, $1 of $5 is better than $0 of $5. I mean, if we've got 5 First Nations that are involved in a project or 9 First Nations involved in a project, it's beneficial to everybody. But you won't do enough of those projects, you're going to get your $5. You know, you just have to be patient. And economic development is the key to First Nation success. We don't want to be wards of the state forever and ever and ever. I want my community, and I can talk for Pabineau First Nation, to be able to sustain itself economically without having to go to government. That funding from government, it's nice to have, but I don't need it because I've got my own source revenue where I'm addressing my housing issues, because we all know there's a lack of housing, the health issues, the education. We all know there's just not enough funding for First Nations. So how do we address that? Green energy is providing us an opportunity to develop and to get at the head of the table. And that's what's so exciting. And I think that's what we have to do. You know, for us in Pabineau, and what approach we've taken with our partners here up north is, you know, we continue to weigh our decisions on the next 7 generations. We continue to balance our 4 pillars. We view partnership as a key to success. We're open to any partnership. We talk to anybody. Anybody comes knocking at the door, we'll talk. We'll say if it's doable or not doable. If it's not doable, we walk away friends at the end. But I mean, we've got to create those partnerships. Everybody's got to create them. And we're going to continue to actually focus our effort on the clean energy hub in the Port of Baldoon, as well as our own. I mean, we have a development on Vanier Boulevard. We have a strip mall going up. We have a gaming center going up. We have a gas station going up. That's all a part of economic development, which is going to enable us to have money to invest in these green energy opportunities. And that's the way we're looking as we move forward. So in closing, I would just say, you know, one of the things we have to remember, and you know, it's not a cliche, it's the truth. Only when the last tree has died and the last river has been poisoned and the last fish has been caught, that we will realize we can't eat money. And that's a proverb that has been used, you know, it's a Cree Indian proverb. So, you know, it's the truth. So we have to keep that balance. So I thank you for the opportunity to present. I could talk for hours. I love green energy. I believe it's the opportunity for us as First Nations to prosper. And I love the work that's being done with ICE, with ACE, which is the climate change individuals. And I love the fact that Jedi was able to put this on. And I look forward to participating tomorrow in a really good discussion with what we've developed at the port and with our partner having the Port of Baldoon there as well. So I thank you for the opportunity to present. If there's any questions, I'm open to answering any questions you have. Thank you.
Well, and Chief Terry, we do have a few minutes before our break at 10:45, so we will open it up to a few Q&A if anyone has any questions. But we do have a couple to start us off. Where do you hope to see Indigenous communities in 10 years when it comes to clean energy?
I want to see us as the leaders. I want to see us as the people who are leading the charge, who are actually saying we're doing something to address climate change. I think, from my perspective, we're at the cusp now. We just have to be there to take advantage of those opportunities, and I think we can do that. And it's in partnership, engaging the proponents that are out there. A lot of that money is coming is an opportunity for investment now. We have two coasts. You're either on the BC coast or the Atlantic coast. We're very fortunate that we have an opportunity here at the Port of Beldoon with the Atlantic coast, and I think I would love to see more First Nation developers. Ideally, a First Nation windmill developer would be phenomenal. I don't think we have that yet. I'd like to see a lot more of our youth involved in green energy. There's going to be opportunity. There's going to be employment, as Terry Lynn had stated. This is the future. And, we've got to be at the front of the bus. And I believe working with, the educators out there, the community colleges, the trades that are going to be available, guiding our youth into the who are interested in green energy into those fields. So I would like to see us be at the front and not at the back of the bus.
We'll just we'll finish up with one question before we get to our quick networking section before our break. Out of all the clean energy opportunities coming up, which would you say you are most excited for?
The hydrogen opportunity is there. It's right at the door right now. That is probably green energy in all regards excites me. But I mean, whether it be carbon capture, biomass, but I believe hydrogen is right because of what's happened in the world right now. The need for hydrogen is there. The European market is open. And that is the one that excites me the most, because if we can get into that market as First Nations and have equity in that, we're talking billions. It's not millions, it's billions. And it's an opportunity for First Nations. And I see that as something that could be prosperous for all of us in First Nations in the Atlantic region anyway, specifically in Northern New Brunswick, with our sister communities here, that we could take the lead. And and we consider MB, I consider MB Power a partner. And really, they've done work, and they've done work with First Nations, and they're willing to work with First Nations. But their hands are sort of tied because it's a crown corporation. That's the reality, right? So yeah, they may say we're a separate entity, but ultimately they report to government, and government owns them. So we've got to try to find a process where we're able to actually participate in an open market for the sale of power, but at the same time not put MB Power out of business, because that's a challenge. But I would like to see us, hydrogen to me is the one that excites me the most. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Chief Terry Richardson, for providing your insight on clean energy and how, from a community level, that you see the opportunities are there for the communities and the Indigenous people here in New Brunswick. So, we'll all in again for providing your insight, and we look forward to, your presentations and all your insight over the next 2 days.